Hello and welcome to Stock and Roll, the podcast where we deep dive into the world of equity compensation. In today's episode, we're returning to one of our favorite topics, the UK's incredibly sophisticated landscape of tax-advantaged plans. We're joined once again by Fallon, Legal Director in Tapestry Compliance, who bring decades of expertise in navigating the complexities of UK share ownership. In our previous conversation, we explored global employee share plans, and today Chris will walk us through the mechanisms of both SIP and SAPE plans. Let's dive in. Okay, Chris, we're back again.
Hello.
Today we are picking your brains on something that I don't know so much about, but is super, super important for everyone that lives in the UK and wants to operate in the UK. Call it tax advantage schemes in UK. Could you start off with giving like a brief overview of why this is a known episode?
You've come to the wrong man if you want a brief overview. So the UK was one of the first countries to really get the idea that employee ownership is a good thing. And as a result, it has put in place various rules and regulations to facilitate the acquisition of shares by employees. And as part of that, it has seen the benefits of, or at least come to realise the benefits of reducing the tax charges that might otherwise arise in relation to employees acquiring shares in connection with their employment. And so successive UK governments, it's not just one, this is now a pact that goes back for probably the best part of 50 years. They put in place various arrangements which have intended to reduce the tax charges or the tax burden in connection with employee ownership. So as a result, we've got quite a complex framework of tax advantage plans in the UK. They used to be approved insofar as you had to get consent or approval before you put them in place. And now they're called tax advantage, so you can go ahead and implement them, but you've just got to make sure that you've followed all the rules and you've registered them with the UK revenue. And so we've got four main plans in the UK. Got the UK Share Save, sometimes called Save As You Earn. The Share Incentive Plan, or SIP. The Enterprise Management Incentive Plan, which is typically open to slightly smaller companies, and it's an option-based plan. And then finally, we've got the Company Share Option Plan, which is another type of plan. And like the EMI plan, it's a discretionary arrangement whereby you can pick and choose who gets to have an option. Whereas the first two, the SIP and the SOA, they're all employee plans, and they're intended to facilitate broad-based acquisition of shares by employees on broadly the same terms. Whereas SIP and EMI, as I say, you can pick and choose and you can vary the terms on which people participate.
And all these different structures, they give some sort of a tax advantage schemes versus what you typically see as a general rule of thumb on tax, right?
Absolutely. So the very rough rule of thumb, certainly in the UK, and I'd say in most jurisdictions, not all, worldwide, is the creation of a right to acquire a share is typically not going to be subject to tax. It is a time at which you become entitled to receive the share, like vesting or exercise of an option. That is the point where tax is typically charged, and it is typically an income tax charge on the value of that share, less anything you paid for it in case of an option, or on a discount. And there's also going to be typically withholding on that income tax charge, and again, very typically, there'll also be social security on the employee and the employer on the taxable value of that share. So that's the default, and the as I say, the UK has put in place a framework of arrangements where that default is either reduced or exempted entirely.
And you answered it a bit, but if you were to kind of compare UK with the rest, this is a bit hard to kind of grasp into one answer, but if you were to compare UK with the rest, what would you say is different than what you see in the other European countries? Like,
I think we're ahead of the curve. I think it's interesting actually, considering the sort of the political settlement of the UK is not necessarily one in which, say in France, I think the the politics in France are such that workers' rights and employee rights, I think it's reasonably safe to say, are placed at a higher level of regard than they are in say, in the UK or certainly the US. But that said, we have a more generous and perhaps a more far-sighted approach, with apologies to my European friends, to the benefits of employee ownership. And as a result, we've got more generous tax reliefs available. That's not to say that the French, they have a form of Macron, Emmanuel Macron in his time as finance minister in France, implemented a tax-relieved form of share ownership. There's also forms of tax relief on certain types of options in France. So they're there. Germany's also got some tax relief available, but as has Spain. But in the UK, we have got the most generous, I would say, form of government-backed employee ownership programs. Countries like the United States, Israel, Ireland, they've all got them, but not quite as sophisticated or as wide-ranging as we have.
No, because kind of saying that there's 4 different general plan mechanisms. I don't think that so many of the other countries, as far as I know, have like 4 different plans for different purposes, and all are kind of qualified. So
and when we introduce new ones, we've kept the old ones as well. So we're very keen on it.
And to kind of dig a bit more into the details on it, like the SIP-SAVE plan obviously is very strong or the SIP-SAVE plans are strong in the UK.
Yes.
Could you give a bit of intro to what is it? How do you need to structure it, and how will it work?
I'm assuming this podcast is going to be 36 hours long. So to start with the ShareSave or SAYE, so it is a form of, there are 2 elements to it. Employees are granted a right to acquire shares in the future in the shape of an option. And that option is typically exercisable rather, in 3 or 5 years after the date of grant. And that option is granted over shares in the issuing company, which the employee can acquire, as I say, at the end of the 3 or 5 year option window. They are at the same time given the opportunity to enter into a savings contract. So this is the second part of the SAYE option, and whereby over the length of the option period, they make savings out of their after-tax salary on a monthly basis to pay for that share on the 3rd or 5th anniversary. And the payment of the share is based on the market value of the share at the time the option is granted. And it gets better than that because the option can allow for a discount on that market value of up to 20% from the market value at the time of grant. There are very complex rules in terms of how that market value is determined, but as a very rough rule of thumb, you can discount up to 20% from the market value of the shares at the time of grant.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that's part of SAYE. When the employee comes to exercise that option, as I say, on the 3rd or the 5th anniversary of the date of grant, they pay the exercise price, which they've saved for over 3 or 5 years. To go back to the default I was talking about earlier, the acquisition of a share in the UK by an employee is typically an income taxable event. So the market value of that share, less anything you pay for it, is subject to income tax. That income tax charge is exempted for the exercise of an SOA option. The tax charge on the difference between the price the employee is paying and the market value of the share at the time of exercise is not subject to UK income tax. And it's never subject, there's a slight quirk. I know I said earlier that the default is to have withholding, and there's always social security, or nearly always social security. For an SOA option, there is no withholding, almost never. And there is no social security. So it's a slight quirk. So there's the exercise of the option is tax, national insurance or social security free, no withholding, and then any growth in that share's value from the time you've acquired it at the time of exercise to the date of sale, that'll be subject to capital gains tax. And that's probably the subject of another podcast another day.
Definitely.
About how that gets paid and the issues that can arise in relation to that. So there is still some tax to pay in relation to SAYE. And unfortunately, the UK government's just put up capital gains tax and reduced the exempt amount, which is exempt from capital gains tax. So there is increasing amounts of capital gains tax to pay in relation to ShareSave. But it is still income tax and social security exempt.
And that is, we also see that in some countries that we are working about, that the income tax is remaining quite stable and the capital gain tax is increasing a bit, and then the difference is not as big as it used to.
Yes,
but still, it's there, right? So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's getting less attractive in the UK, unless the UK government comes to recognise that increasing numbers of participants in these plans are now having to, because capital gains tax, because it's a tax which is paid by the individual and it isn't typically paid through payroll, it is the responsibility of the participant to report and pay it. So we are seeing increasing numbers of participants in these plans who are now subject to this tax, where they might not have been before, because the tax relief amounts, if more than quartered, it's down to £3,000 now. And so lots of people are now into capital gains taxable events, and they're having to learn how to pay it when they might necessarily ever have made a tax return before. So it's damaging the utility and the ability of the share save to really incentivize employees when they think they're entering into a tax-free arrangement, and they're being clobbered for increasing amounts of capital gains tax. So
100%. And SIP plans.
That was SAY. Well, that was a very, very high level.
No, but it's great.
So SIP is the younger brother or distant cousin of the SAYs. The SAYs has been around for, well, almost as long as I have, whereas SIP was introduced in the year 2000 by the then Chancellor Gordon Brown, and in those days it was called the All-Employee Share Ownership Plan, or ESOP. And it's been rebranded since then to the Share Incentive Plan. So the share save is all about a future right to acquire shares. So it's about an options that you can exercise in 3 or 5 years' time and acquire shares in 3 or 5 years' time. The SIP is all about upfront awards of shares on day one, essentially. It's about the purchase and the acquisition of shares now. And then holding those shares for a period of time and then getting tax relief depending on how long you have held those shares for. There are 4 different components of the share incentive plan. The first of which is a free share award, whereby an issuer can grant a right to issue shares where the issuer issues shares to employees with a value of up to £1,800. There are various rules where you can pick and choose which employees can qualify, but generally speaking, it's done on an all-employee basis. Everybody gets broadly the same number of shares and the same value of shares. And so long as those shares are held in a special trust, a SIP trust by a SIP trustee, those shares can be completely exempt from income tax and capital gains tax, so long as they're sold straight out of the trust after the 5th anniversary that they were acquired. So it's quite a long time to hold them for, but if you hold them for 5 years, those shares can be completely tax-free.
£1,800.
Yes.
Annual, so you can do like one every year, or 1,800
in every tax year. Yeah. So,
and the value can go 10x, and you're still on.
Correct.
Oh, well.
Yeah. It's a fantastic tax wrapper, and that's just the first component of a share incentive plan. The next 2 are often intertwined. So, in addition to the right to acquire shares for free, employees can be given the opportunity to buy shares out of their gross salary. So unlike the share save or SAY, where people pay for shares out of their net salary, this is out of gross or untaxed salary. And employees can acquire, and again, this is per tax year, up to £1,800 worth of shares in the issuing company out of their gross salary, which again, if those shares are held in a special SIP trust for the 5 years, those shares can be then withdrawn or sold out of the trust for no tax at all.
So you can do both 1,800 in a free share and 1,800 in a discounted.
I got the free share wrong. We need to edit that. It's 3,600 for the free share. So
Okay, that's no, but
sorry, engineer.
No worries. And we'll fix that.
Thank you. It's 3,600 for free shares. So it's £1,800 for partnership shares, and then the next component is called the matching share. And that allows companies to grant I'm going to use the same term now, but a right to acquire a free share on a basis of every partnership or purchase share that's been bought by the employee, and they can award up to 2 free matching shares for every partnership share that's been bought by the employee. So just to reduce it down to the values, if an employee can acquire up to £1,800 worth of partnership shares, the most matching shares that they can receive strictly should have a value of about 3,600 because 2 for 1.
Huh.
And then and again, those shares have to be held in a special SIPP trust for up to 5 years for them to receive the full tax relief that's available. That is to say, no income tax on withdrawal, and any sale out of the trust will not be subject to capital gains tax. So it's pretty tax advantageous.
Definitely, that's definitely among the more favorable that I've heard of as well. So.
And the final component is dividend shares. So you could have been given your free shares, you could have been purchased your partnership shares, you could have been given matching shares, and these are all held in the SIPP trust on your behalf. If any dividends are paid on those shares, employees can be given the opportunity to have the proceeds of those dividends reinvested into further planned shares, which slightly shorter time horizon on those. So long as they're held for at least 3 years, they will be they'll be exempted from any income tax charges that might otherwise apply to those shares. And again, they can be sold out of the trust free from capital gains tax. So there's 4 types of award that you can have under a SIPP: free, partnership, matching, or dividend. And altogether they form a pretty comprehensive and extremely tax efficient form of share ownership.
Do you have to do this for everyone, or can you do it for just kind of a selected group of people?
That's a really, really good question. So whatever offer you make, be it to acquire free shares, be it to acquire partnership, with or without a match, has to be done on an all-employee basis. Both I'm going to get this the wrong way around, and I apologise to the listeners. The UK tax legislation is quirky in many ways. The SAYE requires, and the SIPP both require issuers to make the offers on same or similar terms. I can't remember whether it's the SAYE which says same. I think it's similar. And I think the SIPP legislation requires the offer to be made on the same terms. So if it's if you decide that the offer is going to be a 1-for-1 match, it has to be that for everybody who buys a partnership share. If you say that people can't acquire £1,800 worth of shares and you're having a lower limit, it's got to be the same for everybody who participates in that offer. There are various rules that relate to who and which companies and which employees of which company can participate in that offer. That's probably the subject of another extremely detailed podcast. But by and large, companies can choose which of their subsidiary companies allow their employees to participate in that offer. So long as it is a company which is under the control of the issuing company, it can be a qualifying or constituent company for that offer. But once it's a constituent company within the plan, all UK resident employees of that plan, of that company rather, must be given the right to participate in that offer. There are various rules that allow you to disqualify employees who haven't reached a certain length of service. And for SIPP and SAYE, those time periods are different because why should they be the same? But you can disqualify certain employees who haven't been there for long enough. And again, you can choose whether to include people who aren't resident in the UK. You must include a UK resident, but you have the option of picking and choosing the non-residents. And that's very broadly it. There are certain other qualification rules as well.
And you mentioned trust. So
yes.
if you're a company or an issuer that kind of wants to use this, how do you go about it with a trust? Where do you keep your shares and your rights and all?
So, trusts is again probably podcast number 37. So very, very roughly and at an extremely high level, a trust is essentially an instrument or a form of settlement whereby a trustee will hold assets on behalf of nominated beneficiaries. The SIPP trust is a specific form of statutory trust whereby the trustee has to abide by certain rules and regulations and processes to ensure that shares are held by and for participants in the SIPP in order for the tax relief to be available. It has to be UK resident. There's certain other requirements that are beholden on the trustee, but essentially they've got to hold the free shares or the partnership shares or the matching shares or the dividend shares on behalf of the employee for the requisite lengths of time that are necessary for the tax relief to be available. There's various rules in relation to mandatory holding periods for free and matching shares. There's various rules in relation to the length of time that the shares have to be held to get any sort of tax relief, which I'm not getting into, because essentially if you hold the shares for less than 3 years and it's free, matching or partnership share, some tax relief is available, but not all.
Yeah.
It's only once they've been held by the trustee for at least 5 years that all of the tax relief is available. And the trustee's got to follow those rules.
Yeah. So you have to be specific trust or specific setup that have these stuff in place.
It's got to be a specific type of settlement which has got to meet the statutory requirements.
Yeah.
So when you're putting in place the plan to enable the operation of the SIP, you typically speaking will have a set of plan rules, which again have to abide by the UK statutory rules to just at a documentary level to ensure that the tax relief is available. But it's the same with the trust and the trust deed, which creates the terms and conditions upon which the trustees can act.
Is it relevant to talk about like participants' rates here? I assume when it's free shares, most say yes, but on the investment programs or generally,
yes. It's interesting. Some people do turn them down. I've been doing this for 25 years. I think I've come across 4 where I've had someone refuse shares for various different reasons. I'm reminded of Ned Flanders in The Simpsons, who regards it as a form of gambling. But at the participation or the contributory level, and I think this would be the same for SAY as well, participation rates can sometimes be surprisingly low, depending on how much effort the company's put into communicating and saying the good news about share plans.
Yeah.
And also you can have a workforce who culturally may not necessarily be familiar with it. There may be lots of different factors as to how much cash is available in that workforce to invest in the company. That said, the longer these plans are in place, the higher the participation rates will be, as particularly where company share prices start to increase. Employees talk to one another. They start to tell each other about good news about the money that they've got out of the plan. But a good starting point would be about 20%.
Yeah, so you'll be happy with 20%
I think
first year.
Year one, with a relatively cold open or a big bang for a SIP and SOA, you can get participation of 1 in 5. You've done well. Yeah. And once you start heading over 30%, I think you're doing pretty well.
Okay.
There are some companies out there with almost universal employee ownership, whereby everybody, they don't necessarily run or control the business, but all employees have a share, like all 80% of employees have a share, which is astonishingly high.
It is. Oh, that's super exciting. I think that's good for the SIP plans.
Yes.
Knowing that we didn't cover more than 10% of what we could have covered, I think.
I could talk all day, and you don't want me to.
Yeah. No, but definitely. Let's we can kind of do more on it later as well. But I think it could also be interesting to dig a bit into the CSOPs.
Okay.
What is it, and why is it a good idea?
So the SIP and the SAY, they're all employee plans, and they've got to be operated, as I said, broadly on the same terms, same or similar. I can't remember which. Whereas the CSOP and the EMI, these are discretionary option arrangements. So these are rights to acquire shares in the future, which, if certain conditions are met, the acquisition of that share can be partially or entirely exempt from the income tax and social security charges which might otherwise apply. So CSOP is the older brother of EMI, and it's been around for a long time, and there have been a lot of questions as to whether it's still worth having as part of the framework that we've got. But it's so far it's here to stay, and it's been quite recently improved. The tax relief that is associated with it has effectively been doubled a couple of years ago. So what it allows for is the grant of options over shares at the time of grant with a value of up to £60,000. The market value is also the driver for the exercise price of the option. So the exercise price has to be equal to the market value of the shares at the time of grant. And so long as you hold that option for at least 3 years from the date of grant, any increase in the value of those shares to the time of exercise will be exempt from income tax and social security. There are rules for allowing early exercise if you're a good leaver in certain categories, or if you were to unfortunately die. There are also rules allowing the sale of the company or the reorganisation of the company. Certain type of company event can take place, or corporate event can take place before the third anniversary of the day of grant, and you still get some form of tax relief. But if you exercise before the third anniversary in any other circumstance, you pay income tax in the ordinary way. And to go right back to the start of the podcast, that means you are charged to income tax on the value of the share you receive at the time of exercise, less any exercise price you pay for it. So it's potentially a very tax efficient form of option structure. It's not as common as it used to be. As I said, until recently, the tax-free amount was linked to a maximum value of shares at grant of £30,000. It's since been doubled to £60,000, and it was typically used at the higher echelons of company operations, whereby senior managers and executives were given the right to participate in these plans. But as time's gone on and awards have gotten bigger and bigger, the £30,000 individual limit has gotten less relevant to some of these huge awards that get granted at the discretionary executive level.
When you say 30,000 and 60,000,
yes,
is that the fair market, or is it Black and Scholes value of the option, or is it in share value of the option?
It is the share value. So, well, if it's a listed company, it will be the market value of the shares at the time of grant by reference to there's a UK statutory regulation that tells you how to take that value. But very, very roughly, it is the mid-market closing price of the shares at the time of grant, which is usually, so what time are we recording this podcast? It is it's 4:30. So the mid-market closing price of a share in, say, Sainsbury's PLC has just been determined about 4 minutes ago. And so now we know what the mid-market closing price is today. If we were granting an option an hour ago, the mid-market closing price was yesterday's mid-market closing price. So we'd use that when making that determination.
And the strike price is the same?
So that is the basis. So exercise price, strike price, or option price, one and the same.
Okay, cool. And EMI?
So this is another form of discretionary option arrangement. So you can pick and choose who gets to participate. And it's, again, this was introduced at the same time as the SIP, and it is aimed at smaller or medium-sized companies with one eye on achieving high levels of growth. It's a way to incentivize and to enable those companies to recruit key members of staff. They might not necessarily have reached the fruition of their journey, but it's to get people in and to keep them in. So I'm bugging this bit up. I'll start again. So I'm starting to flag a bit now. So enterprise management incentive schemes are there to incentive. I'll start again. The EMI scheme is open to small and medium-sized companies with one eye on achieving high levels of growth. It is open to specific types of company, and it's got very prescriptive rules in terms of which company can and can't qualify. All the other tax advantage plans I talked about earlier, there are loads of qualification rules that relate to them. But generally speaking, if you're a large listed company, you're probably going to find qualifying for a SIP or CSOP or an SOE quite easy. EMI is a little bit more prescriptive, so it's open to companies with gross assets of less than 30 million. There is an employee headcount rule. You've got to have some sort of operation in the UK. Those rules have relaxed a little bit. Basically, you've got to be operating out of the UK as to at least having a permanent establishment in the UK. You've got to be carrying out a qualifying trade in the UK through that permanent establishment. And you can't be carrying out any type of excluded activity, or at least any great level of excluded activity. So certain types of industries are just off the cards for qualifying for EMI. But it is really generous. This CSOP option I talked about a moment ago allows options over shares with a value at £60,000 at the time of grant. EMI allows options with over shares with a value of £250,000 at the time of grant. There's an overall scheme limit of £3 million. So you can only grant, let's get the maths right, 12 full-size options over an EMI plan. But those are much larger options you might otherwise be able to grant under a CSOP.
And the upside, so the gains can be unlimited. This is just like kind of how much you can give at time zero, right?
Currently, no cap on the gains that you can be exempted from income tax.
Yeah.
Also, for an EMI option, unlike CSOP, where the exercise price or the strike price has to be equal to the market value of the date of grant, EMI options, you don't necessarily have to have an exercise price at all.
Wow.
It can be granted at a discount. It does mean that any discount from the market value of the date of grant is subject to income tax. So if you do grant a discounted option at the time of exercise, there will be income tax to pay, or they're very, very likely to be income tax to pay. But if you grant one with market value as the exercise price, then there will be no income tax to pay at the time of exercise. Assuming all the qualifying rules have been met, the employee's got to have a certain amount of time spent working for the business. I've got to remain in employment. There's all sorts of disqualifying events that can happen in relation to an EMI that can stop it from achieving very high levels of tax relief. Because I haven't finished there. I know I sound a bit like a salesman, but the tax relief that is available to an EMI option goes further than just the income tax and social security exemptions. The business asset disposal relief in the UK, which essentially as of next April, I think the rate's currently 10%, it's going up to 14% next year, I think, is such that if you hold a certain type of asset in the UK and it attracts the business asset disposal relief, or BADA, you have to hold that asset for at least 2 years. And you've got to hold certain types of level of ownership in the company. I am stuffing this bit up. Can I start this again?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry.
No worries.
So I haven't stopped there. The tax relief that's available for an EMI option is, so long as when you come to sell the shares at the time of exercise, there is additional capital gains tax relief available. So the sale of an EMI option share, and again, I have to keep saying this, so long as all the qualifying conditions have been met, when you come to sell the EMI share, you can achieve a capital gains tax rate, which is the business asset disposal relief rate of what will be 14% next April. And you attract that relief by holding the option and or the share that you've acquired on exercise for at least 2 years from the date of grant. So you can be granted an option, an EMI option, exercise on day one, but so long as you then hold the shares that you've acquired on exercise for very nearly 2 years, you can get your 14% capital gains tax rate on the sale of those shares. Equally, you could be granted the EMI option, exercise it on the second anniversary of the date of grant, immediately sell the shares and get the reduced rate of capital gains tax that's available. So it's extremely tax efficient.
It is.
It's not quite as tax efficient as, say, the share incentive plan, but given the share incentive plan is an all-employee plan and it's relatively small holdings of like £3,600 or £1,800, EMI, you can have up to £250,000 worth of shares under option. The potential gains can be substantial, and the potential capital gains tax relief can be equally substantial.
I think when we compare this EMI scheme versus the other, call it startup programs or growth programs that are other places in Europe, I think the EMI is really great.
Yes.
It's easier to qualify, I think, than many others, because the needle eye is extremely tight in some countries, and it's also more generous, and you can kind of include more. And it is something to look for the other countries, the way I see it, at least.
It's super flexible. You can have performance measures attached to it, or the option can simply be subject to time-based vesting. I've seen options which have been exercisable the day after the date of grant, just to get people into the capital gains tax rule sooner rather than later. As I say, it's super flexible. You can really pick and choose how you want to implement it and how it can be rolled out. It can be used as an all-employee arrangement if you have sufficiently small numbers of employees. As I say, it's typically used by the small and medium-sized companies. So you don't see many listed companies with an EMI, with a new EMI scheme. You may see them with an old EMI scheme because they've outgrown it. And it may mean that they simply can't grant any new EMI options because they're simply too big. They've got too many employees, their gross assets are too high, or their trading activities might be such that they are now carrying out an excluded activity. There's all sorts of tripwires with EMI that you've got to be super careful of to make sure that you do qualify for it. But as you say, it's really, really tax efficient form of share ownership.
It is. Are there any kind of you touched a bit upon it, like time wise, you can do whatever vesting you want.
Yes.
And exercise price or strike price, or
yes.
you can do whatever you want, but there's an income tax if it's kind of below.
Yes.
So are there any limitations in the structure? And you mentioned you can also introduce performance into it, and you can still get the same.
Yes.
Are there any kind of limitations in the design that you can't do on the EMI? Just so that when it comes to, okay, we want to make a program and you can, anything that will disqualify it in terms of like the design elements?
There are, in terms of the share rights that can be embedded into the share under option. So I would say if you are starting to look at preferential or varied classes of shares which you're thinking about placing under an EMI option, it's possible that you can still proceed, but look very carefully at how you're doing it to make sure that you're within what is the governing legislation. I'm trying not Schedule 5 for the Income Tax Earnings and Pensions Act. Make sure that you're still going to be compliant. Also, if you are, it's really the devil is in the detail with EMI. You've got to be absolutely certain that you're meeting all the qualifying criteria. There are many qualifying criteria for companies, particularly if you're operating it out of a group. You've got to make certain that the group is a qualifying one, that the employee is a qualifying one. So it's super flexible. But equally, the perils of getting it wrong, given that the quantum of tax at stake can often be very, very substantial. So my advice there is always to get your due diligence done on day -1, to get everything checked, to make sure you qualify to the extent you can be as assured as you can be, because HMRC do allow you to check that you qualify for the data grant. Make sure you know the values at stake, because again, as most companies implementing EMI won't be listed, they won't know the value of a share, so they may sometimes be taking an educated guess as to the value of the shares under option. So make sure you have as much certainty and clarity on the value of the shares under option as possible, so that the full amount of the option, to the extent possible, is going to be subject to the tax relief. And you haven't got it wrong, and there isn't a portion which will be subject to income tax at the time of exercise. Those are the key things, and also making sure your reporting is done properly, because again, like all of the UK Tax Advantage plans, there are extensive certification and reporting requirements that HMRC require you to do, and if you don't do them, the tax can be lost, or the tax relief can be lost.
You touched a bit upon my kind of final question on this, like you touched upon reporting for EMI. Is it, if you were to kind of explain how is it done? Is it like is it and who's doing it? Because this, as you say, it's easy to go wrong here.
Yes.
So just to kind of think, okay, we want to launch an EMI plan. How do we think about reporting? Who do we give the responsibility? Understand that it's a maybe hard to answer quick, but some guiding.
Carefully. Check the requirements in advance. They've changed a number of times over the life of the EMI plan. Once upon a time, everything used to be paper-based, and again, I'll drag in the other tax advantage plans as well. Everything used to be paper-based, and everything was done after the fact in terms of reporting. Because the EMI was the trailblazer insofar as you could grant an EMI option without necessarily having HMRC approval in advance of the grant. But you just had to be certain you met the qualifying criteria. Now the same is true for the CSOP, SIP and SOYE. So long as you're certain you qualify and your employees qualify, you can go ahead and implement the plan. But what you do then have to do is register that plan and certify with HMRC, the UK Tax Authority, and then certify that the statutory requirements are met. And there are certain time limits to make sure that that certification and that report of grants of options or acquisition of shares or various other reportable events in connection with the scheme are sufficiently clearly made to the revenue in the time required. companies should not, I would suggest, do this in-house without speaking to their advisors first. Even just getting a sense check from a suitably qualified professional is probably the necessary thing to do. Given the risk of HMRC essentially with turning the tap off on the tax relief to the extent you get the reporting wrong. I've seen companies miss returns for years at a time, placing in jeopardy the whole tax relief for the entire plan at stake. So, yeah.
But I think that's that sums it well up. And I think seek advice on these things and then make
always
sure
seek advice.
Yeah,
doesn't have to be tapestry compliance.
No. But
it always seek advice.
Yeah. So I think then we've covered the four main tax advantage programs in UK. And I think a lot of info for the listeners to take in. I think this is one of the episodes that I will listen to 3, 4, 5 times to get everything. I could
do a podcast on each of those.
Yeah. And that may also be something we come back to. But yeah, thanks again, Chris. Loved speaking to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.